The dawn of decision. In the early hours of June 6, 1944, the world stood on the edge of transformation. The English Channel churned under a cold wind, waves slapping against the steel hulls of over 5,000 ships, the largest armada ever assembled in human history. Inside darkened cabins and cramped landing craft, young soldiers gripped rifles with trembling fingers, listening to the hum of engines and the distant rumble of naval guns. Above them, the sky remained an ocean of blackness, punctured only by the faint glow of tracer fire. Behind them, on the shores of England, millions of people prayed in silence. Ahead of them lay a continent shrouded in occupation, tyranny, and fear. And on the decks of a command ship anchored far from shore, General Dwight D. Eisenhower stared into the darkness, carrying the weight of an entire world on his shoulders. Operation Overlord was about to begin. D-Day was here, and nothing would ever be the same. This is the story of how the Allied forces invaded Normandy, shattered the Atlantic Wall, and changed the course of the Second World War forever. Not just through tactics or technology, but through unimaginable courage, sacrifice, and human resilience. The Road to Overlord. The World Before D-Day. By early 1944, Europe lay under the iron grip of Nazi Germany. France had fallen. Belgium, the Netherlands, Norway, Poland, Czechoslovakia, all crushed. Millions had been displaced, tortured, imprisoned, or killed. The skies over London had burned under the Blitz. Across the English Channel, the German Wehrmacht constructed layer after layer of defenses along what Hitler boasted was an impregnable structure, the Atlantic Wall. But despite German claims, their empire had cracks. The Soviet Union had pushed them back at Stalingrad and Kursk. North Africa had fallen to the Allies. Italy was collapsing. Yet none of these victories could win the war alone. There was only one path to liberation: invading Western Europe. But such an operation, crossing the Channel and landing on feudaified shores, had never been attempted on such a massive scale. Failure would not simply cost lives, it would prolong the war for years, perhaps decades. Every town in Britain echoed with the movement of forces. Tens of thousands of American, British, Canadian, Free French, Polish, Norwegian, and other Allied troops filled streets and coastlines. Tanks rolled through rural villages, barracks overflowed, supply depots grew like cities. The entire island became a launch pad for liberation. Eisenhower takes command. In December 1943, the Allies entrusted command of the invasion to General Dwight D. Eisenhower, a man known for his calm leadership, strategic mind, and ability to unite people with vastly different personalities. He was not a man who sought glory. He was a man who accepted responsibility. When Eisenhower first walked into the Allied headquarters at Bushy Park, he found himself faced with a mountain of challenges. Logistics. How do you move 156,000 soldiers across the sea in one day? Intelligence. How do you fool the most feared intelligence services in the world? Weather. How do you plan an invasion dependent on tides, moonlight, and storms? Morale. How do you inspire a generation to march toward gunfire? But Eisenhower's greatest challenge was unity. The Allies were not one nation, they were many. British commanders clashed with Americans. Canadians demanded a greater role. French forces pushed for liberation of their homeland. Polish and Czech troops sought vengeance for lost nations. Standing above every disagreement was the simple truth: they had to succeed. Failure was unacceptable. Operation Fortitude, the greatest lie ever told, deceiving an empire. Before a single soldier stepped into a landing craft, the Allies needed to solve one crucial problem. How do you prevent Germany from learning where the invasion will happen? The French coastline stretched for thousands of miles. Normandy was a possible target, But Pas-de-Calais was the obvious one. It was the shortest route across the Channel. It had the strongest German defenses. Hitler believed no sane commander would choose anywhere else, so the Allies turned that belief against him. Inflatable armies, fake radio signals, and a ghost general operation, Fortitude was born, a deception operation so elaborate that it remains one of the greatest strategic illusions in history. The plan included inflatable Sherman tanks that looked real from the air, wooden aircraft placed along airfields, dummy landing craft lining fake ports, staged army movements, fabricated invasion maps that accidentally fell into German hands, bogus radio transmissions simulating troop deployments, a double-agent network feeding lies directly to the German command, and the masterstroke, General George S. Patton, the one commander the Germans most feared, was placed in charge of a non-existent army, the 1st U.S. Army Group, FUSAG. This ghost army was supposedly preparing to invade Pas-de-Calais. The Germans bought the lie completely. Even on D-Day itself, with thousands of Allied troops storming Normandy, Hitler kept elite panzer divisions waiting near Calais, convinced it was all a diversion. The lie saved tens of thousands of lives. The invisible soldiers, codebreakers, and double agents. Behind the front lines, another war was being fought, one of secrecy and silence. At Bletchley Park, cryptographers worked relentlessly, breaking German codes, intercepting messages, and ensuring the deception held firm. Double agents like Garbo, Brutus, and Tate played dangerous games with the Abwehr, sending carefully crafted false intelligence. Had even one been discovered, the entire operation would have collapsed. Instead, their work ensured the Germans were always looking in the wrong direction, at the wrong time, expecting an attack that would never come. The decision that changed history, the storm. On June 4, 1944, the invasion fleet was ready. Soldiers waited on ships, tanks sat secured in holds. Aircraft were lined up at airfields. Thousands of paratroopers prepared for their final briefings. But then, a brutal storm hit the Channel. Waves climbed as high as small buildings. Winds roared across the sea. Visibility dropped. Conditions grew so dangerous that even experienced sailors struggled to remain upright. Every forecast pointed to disaster. Eisenhower faced an impossible choice. Delay and risk losing the element of surprise? Concede and risk catastrophic failure. His advisors were split. Some urged cancellation, others urged faith. Meteorologist James Stagg stepped forward, the only man Eisenhower trusted fully on weather reports. Stagg spoke timidly at first, then more firmly. There will be a break, a short one, on the morning of June 6th. It was not a guarantee. It was a possibility. Eisenhower stood at the head of the room, his face heavy with exhaustion, uncertainty, and the knowledge that thousands of young men were waiting for his order. Silence filled the room. Finally, he said, "Okay, we go." Those 3 words changed the world. The night before D-Day, June 5, 1944, at 22 hours, darkness settled over southern England like a heavy blanket. The wind hissed through the hedgerows and along the coastline where thousands of ships waited silently, lit only by dim red lamps and the pale glow of a half-moon filtering through broken clouds. On the decks of troop carriers, soldiers tried to steady their nerves. Some wrote last-minute letters home. Some prayed. Some smoked cigarettes to hide trembling hands. Some stared into the sea, searching for courage they weren't sure they had. The invasion had been delayed once already, and rumors spread like wildfire. But now the truth was undeniable. Officers walked the decks with tightened jaws. Chaplains moved from group to group, offering soft words. And above the low hum of engines came the lines every soldier remembers. "This is it, boys." The final briefings had been delivered. The mission was underway. There was no turning back. Aboard the USS Bayfield, Utah Beach Forces Private Andrew McConnell, 19 years old, from Ohio, sat on a bench along the hull, holding a folded photograph of his family. His boots were soaked, his stomach churned with fear and seasickness. Across from him, Corporal Don Walker tried to lift spirits. "You know," Walker said, "they say those German guns can't hit a moving boat." "Yeah," McConnell muttered. "You believe that?" "No," Walker answered with a grin. But it sounded good, didn't it? Laughter, nervous, thin, rippled through the cabin. Even fear needed breathing room. The airborne troops prepare at airfields across England. The 101st and 82nd Airborne Divisions, along with British paratroopers and glider pilots, prepared for their role. Drop behind enemy lines and secure key bridges, roads, and towns before the beach landings began. Officers studied maps illuminated by lanterns. Paratroopers checked each other's harnesses and gear. Knives, grenades, flashlights, rations, ammunition, morphine. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Wolverton walked among his men of the 506th PIR, offering encouragement. Many had never seen fear in his eyes before, but tonight his voice carried a tremor of gravity. "Do not forget," he told them. "No matter how scattered we get, we are still the 506th. We move as one, fight as one, and God willing, we'll see each other on the other side." Silence followed. Then the scraping of boots as they boarded the C-47 planes. Churchill's midnight visit in Portsmouth. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill visited the docks, escorted by military police who begged him not to approach the soldiers so close to departure. But Churchill insisted. The men straightened when they saw him, cigars, overcoat, and bulldog determination. He walked slowly, nodding to each unit. "Gentlemen," he said, "history will remember what you do tomorrow." Then, quieter, "And so will those of us who owe you our lives." No grand speech, just truth. Eisenhower's final words. Near midnight, Eisenhower visited the paratroopers before they boarded. He moved from soldier to soldier, shaking hands, smiling, offering small jokes to ease their nerves. Photographs captured the moment forever. Eisenhower leaning forward, speaking to men barely out of their keens. One paratrooper later recalled, "He didn't talk like a general. He talked like a father, sending his sons into danger." As the engines roared to life, Eisenhower stepped back into the wind, saluted the departing planes, and whispered a prayer no one heard. The paratroopers' descent. June 6, 1944. 15 hours. The first C-47 transport planes soared into the night sky, forming vast airborne armadas stretching for miles. Their engines droned with relentless force, shaking the thin fuselages. Inside, red lights glowed dimly. The air was thick with sweat, oil, and fear. Sergeant Harold Denton of the 101st wiped his palms on his trousers. Beside him, Private Roe Murphy tapped nervously on his helmet. "What's wrong?" Denton asked. "I don't like flying," Murphy muttered. "You're not flying," Denton said. "You're falling. Big difference." Murphy winced. "That's what I'm afraid of. Flak and chaos." As the planes neared the French coastline, German anti-aircraft guns erupted in a storm of fire. Explosions burst around the aircraft. Metal fragments tore through wings. Pilots fought to maintain altitude. Inside the holds, paratroopers tightened their grips on overhead cables. Every explosion shook their bones. Every flash of light illuminated fear in their eyes. Lieutenant Hudson shouted over the noise, "Stay sharp. We drop on green. Stick together." But the flak was too heavy. Pilots swerved chaotically. Navigational lines broke. Markers were missed. The airborne drops scattered units across miles of countryside. Some landed in the right zones. Some drowned in flooded fields. Some were surrounded by German patrols the moment their boots hit the ground. Some never made it out alive. The jump, The red light blinked, then green. The jumpmaster shouted, "Go, go, go!" One by one, the paratroopers hurled themselves into the darkness. The cold air punched their chests. The wind roared like thunder. Below them, Normandy stretched like a labyrinth of fields, hedgerows, rivers, and towns, lit by the glow of burning flak. Chutes opened with violent force. Men swung wildly in the wind, trying to steer. Bullets streaked through the sky. Tracer rounds passed inches from harness straps. Some chutes caught fire. Some collapsed. Others drifted wildly off course. Private McLean saw the ground rushing up and whispered, "Please, please," before slamming into a tree and blacking out. Lieutenant Crandall landed atop a farmhouse roof, rolled off, and dropped into mud. When he stood, he was alone. No unit, no radio, no landmarks. But the mission had begun. Scattered bravery. Despite confusion, the paratroopers adapted. They grouped together in small bands, sometimes from different regiments, divisions, or even nations. They seized crossroads. They cut German communication lines. They attacked machine gun nests. They blocked reinforcements heading toward the beaches. In Sainte-Mère-Église, American paratroopers fought fiercely to secure the first town liberated in the invasion. Fires burned in the square. German soldiers rushed through narrow streets. The church bell rang relentlessly. A paratrooper named John Steele became trapped on the church steeple, his parachute tangled in the spire. He dangled helplessly for hours, watching fight after fight below him until the Germans finally cut him down and made him a prisoner, only for him to escape later and rejoin his unit. The night was chaos. The night was terror. But the night belonged to the Allies. The Armada moves. June 6, 1944, 2:30 hours. While the paratroopers fought behind enemy lines, the greatest naval force in history pushed slowly toward Normandy. The sea, though calmer than the day before, still heaved with rolling waves that drenched the decks of landing craft. Many soldiers grew violently seasick, clutching their helmets and vomiting into the water as officers shouted commands. Admiral Bertram Ramsay, commander of the naval forces, observed the Armada from his flagship. The scale shocked even him. Battleships, destroyers, transport ships, landing craft, minesweepers, gunboats, supply vessels. The sea was covered with steel. Radar operators monitored German patrol boats, U-boats, and coastal defenses. Pilots in escort planes scanned the skies for the Luftwaffe. But German aircraft were largely absent, caught off guard by the scale of the attack. Naval bombardment begins. At 05:10, the first Allied battleships opened fire. The thunder was deafening. The horizon flashed with explosions. The ground miles inland shook like an earthquake. German bunkers along the beaches were hammered with shells the size of tree trunks. Machine gun nests disintegrated. Artillery positions vanished under fire. Yet the Germans held fast. They had spent years fortifying the coastline. Some bunkers were so heavily reinforced that even battleship fire barely cracked them. The soldiers heading toward the beaches did not know how much of the defenses had survived, and in truth, far too many had.